The format is pretty simple. We're going to start with the introduction of these guys, and while I'm asking the very first question, I want you all to line up behind this microphone up here. It's in this aisle over here, and get some questions into your head and everything like that. But we have just a few simple rules. There's going to be one question per person, and then you can go to the back of the line and hope to get your second question in, because there's going to be a lot, and we only have an hour. Try to keep your questions short and to the point. I know you want to tell these guys about how much you love their game, or how much you hate their game, or how much you love to hate their game, but just keep it short. And focus on the questions about the specific genre, not really about their specific game, because then what the hell will these other guys talk about, right? So no trolling, and go ahead and start lining up, if you could. Now, do it. All right, guys, first question, you ready? I at least like to hear the echo. How can the industry step out of the shadow of World of Warcraft and make gamers realize that there are more than orcs, elves, level grinds to do in the MMO universe? How can you, the developers, prove that not all games are just another grindy MMO? And with that, we're going to go right to Frost at the end and work our way down. Sorry.
Thanks for that. So I think with what we did on WildStar, we kind of made sure that the thing that you do all the time, which is the combat, is entertaining and fun. It wasn't something that you kind of have to feel like it's a grind. Combat for us is huge, and if you look at our dungeons, for example, our 5-person content, it is brutal and it is fun, and it's based off of kind of where you're located and how the telegraphs kind of come in. So to me, the moment to moment, you have to make that fun. If that's not fun, then you're gonna kind of be lumped in with everything else, being that, you know, same old grindy stuff.
Stephen?
I think that's a really good approach to take. And I started in the industry as a level designer on The Secret World, as a dungeon designer, where I was a part of the dungeon team that our philosophy was really all about making sure that you couldn't just stroll through the dungeons. You had to really aggressively plan and coordinate with your builds across the entire team. And we had a lot of really, directed and telegraphed attacks that you had to be actively avoiding. So I really agree with you, Stephen, that that's a really excellent approach to take. What we're doing with Warhammer 40,000 Eternal Crusade is we're going completely away from the World of Warcraft model. We actually take a lot of inspiration from PlanetSide 2, from Sony Online Entertainment. What we're working on, or we're working towards, is an MMO where the players provide the majority of the content, where it's you and your friends fighting against them and their friends in a massive open world. And so when people think about MMORPGs, when you hear that word, MMORPG, you think about World of Warcraft. It's almost defined itself so narrowly now that if you say MMORPG, people don't necessarily think PlanetSide 2. And I think one of the biggest things that the industry can do to sort of get out from under that shadow is make games that are really different, which is why it's really exciting to be here with a panel of people who are trying to do exactly that.
Yeah, that's really the key. Is if you want to move away from the same old recipe, then you have to bake a different cake. There's a lot of really cool things about MMOs versus single player experiences or limited multiplayer experiences. MMOs are all about social experiences, about meeting other people and having reasons to meet other people so that you can work together for common cause and bigger goals. There's lots of ways to skin that cat. Just completely doing the lather, rinse, repeat thing on an MMO model today is kind of insane. Though that's a really good way to spike and fail. So you've got to build something else. And, of course, that's what all of us are trying to do.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so I think, for me, in a word, it's participation. If you look at the community, that's really what makes these online games. You see what people do, guild leaders, people who create Wikipedia articles or, entire sites. All that stuff, it's lived outside of the game for a very long time. And I think bringing that into the game, into the MMOs, letting the community make things that go into your game for everyone, is really the future of where MMOs are headed. Even like Twitch Plays Pokemon, for example, the crazy stories that come out of that, that's practically an MMO, honestly. And I think that's where we're headed. There's a lot of big questions. We've all taken stabs at it in the past. We're learning a lot, and I think that's just going to keep getting better.
Go ahead, Josh.
So yeah, I think what we're looking at is driving more community-oriented content, allowing players to really design and customize their experience in the game. It's getting to the point where the static content is consumed in a matter of hours and days, and a lot of money is being put into that content, which is basically can't be kept up with anymore. So the kind of stuff we're looking at is kind of looking back with Star Wars Galaxies and some of the other sandbox-oriented games and seeing how we can best deliver kind of a unique experience, but also deliver the community-driven experience in those games as well.
Hi.
I completely agree. I think the community component is really important. One of the primary design goals we have at Pathfinder Online is maximizing meaningful human interaction. But I think that it has to be larger than just interaction between the people. One of the big things that's going to start happening with MMOs and all these online worlds now is persistence. So the idea that an MMO is a write once, read many application where you do the same content over and over and over again is going to go away. And we're going to start to see worlds where the players have a meaningful, persistent impact on that game world. And they make changes to the world that other players then interact with. And that creates a feedback mechanism which makes the entire experience much more immersive and much more engaging than what we are currently seeing with a lot of the games on the market.
Excellent. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and take our first question from the audience.
I just wanted some commentary basically on...
We're getting the mic. Hold on.
Needs more juice.
Yeah.
Tap it.
Speak really loud.
You can yell that too.
It's a good reason to yell now. So.
Oh, lights on.
Test.
There we go.
Success.
Now yell.
So just wanted some commentary on AI in your games, this is specifically for Mr. Georgeson, but anyone who wants to answer, really, and just going back towards, away from, I guess, player-generated stuff, I want to see more AI type stuff in games, so whatever you guys want to say on that.
And we'll go ahead and start at the other end. That way everybody goes back and forth. Ryan, if you want to start.
Oh, sure. Okay, so it may not be obvious to everybody, but it's really easy to write AI that will always beat the players. That's actually not hard. The hard part is to make AI that loses but makes you have fun while you're beating it. And we're going to start to see more and more of that type of AI in the future. We're going to see a lot of opportunity to offload the AI so that you can get a whole server farm running that's just chewing away in the background, figuring out what all the NPCs and monsters should be doing when you're not there to see them do it, so that when you reach an area that they're in, you'll see the results of their actions. You know, stuff like EC2 from Amazon, the ability to kind of cloud all that activity behind the scenes is going to be a really, really big deal. You're seeing that right now with Titanfall. Titanfall connects to Microsoft's Azure cloud services, and Azure actually runs all the NPC grunts and stuff that are in that world, so that the individual Xbox Ones that are in there don't have to do it. And we're going to see a lot more of that stuff really soon.
Yeah, I guess I don't have too much more to add to that. I think, as you mentioned, is the AI is trying to make it, if you make it too hard and more complicated, it's going to make the experience more frustrating. So yeah, it's always the challenge to find kind of the median between where it's a challenge, yet it's not completely wiping you out every time.
Yeah, well, I'll take the other approach, which is basically, or I think the opposite of your question, which is like, complex AI actually holds very little interest to me. I think most of the cool things you can get from AI, if they can build a cool city, if they can build a cool empire, whatever it is just way better if you can put it in the hands of the players. If you come across something and someone else has built it, if they really want to defend it, that's the kind of game I want to play. I think that's the kind of game we're starting to see more of. I mean, if you look at games like Daisy, like Rust, stuff like that, where maybe you want to build really complex AI to do that, it's way cooler when other players do it. And that's the kind of game that I'm interested in seeing and interested in making.
All right, Dave, your turn.
Well, AI really only has one purpose, which is to, create fun. And so everything that you should be doing with AI should be designing a situation in which the players are having a good time. It's our opinion that basically AI should be thinking differently all the time and judging variables and deciding what it should and shouldn't do on a regular basis or on a constant basis, so that it's not incredibly predictable. Orcs act a certain way and you go to a certain range and fire an arrow at them and it's kind of an instant kill. That kind of game is very, 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 very predictable. AI that's more flexible and adjusts to situational variables is more interesting and can create more fun gameplay experiences. So pushing that is worthwhile, but remember, the goal is always fun. If it's not fun or it's too variable and people can't predict it at all, then it's no good. You got to throw that out and do something else.
I agree with a lot of what's being said up here, absolutely. I really like this idea that anything that an AI can do, players, it's more interesting when done in the hands of the players, and I think that feeds into the philosophy on Eternal Crusade as well. The way that we're using AI is, especially in this sort of massive battle game, and a game about territory control, we're using AI to force a reaction from the players. AI will come in, invade a territory, and then force the owners of that territory to say, well, what's more valuable, pushing into player territory or protecting my rear from the AI that's pushing into my territory? So I think, much like David was just saying, there's a purpose for the AI in your game, and maybe that's creating fun, maybe that's creating the feeling, the emotion of terror. Whatever that purpose for your AI is, you have to design it to do that well, and then make sure that your AI forces a reaction.
So with WildStar, we do a lot of stuff that is pertaining to the telegraph system, which you've seen, kind of has like the red circle on the ground or something like that. Sometimes we attach that to players, and then they'll go run to their friends, and then it hurts their friends. And we find that funny, right? Because people are like, no, 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 stay away from me, right? But the thing is, it's involving somebody else, right? And that's kind of using the AI to go, okay, I'm finding the player, and then they're going to attach to that, but it's involving somebody else that, as you guys are saying, it makes it a lot more fun. So complex sort of systems that revolve around the player are really kind of the way we're doing it. Also just the way that certain NPCs kind of hang out and do stuff in natural sort of ways is always intriguing as well, and something we're looking at too.
Awesome.
In MMOs today, a lot of that information is very visible, how much armor you need to have this percentage mitigation. How do you plan to bring some of that mystery back that used to be in the old days, where it's not about knowing the numbers, but having the knowledge and the experience to be able to execute well?
For those that didn't hear it, actually, he asked, how do you bring back the mystery in MMOs where instead of just looking at stats, you actually have to discover how to defeat encounters and things like that inside an MMO space? And go ahead, Stephen.
So for us, it's about player skill. So I don't know if you've seen any of our dungeons in WildStar. They're pretty brutal. So the thing about it is having the gear to bring down those bosses is definitely part of it. But a lot of it in our game is paying attention and being able to master all the things, the double jumps, your sprints, your dodging, that sort of thing comes into play a lot. And we're noticing that even in pugs and stuff like that. Even with people that have that gear, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to beat the dungeon. And it actually forces people to communicate a lot more, which is fine by us. So, yeah.
I think that's a fantastic question in the traditional MMO space. Absolutely. I think, and I don't think that these numbers have arisen from any sort of negative impetus. I feel like they're there for a reason, and players have constantly been asking for more and more ways to interact with the core mechanics of the game, and there are players who absolutely value that sort of really digging and crunching deep into the systems. You see forums like Elitist Jerks who always take and deconstruct everything in your game so that they know how to play better, and that's really neat and really interesting. How to get away from that, it's less applicable to us since we're not that kind of World of Warcraft style MMO where you have all those stats. We're a third-person shooter. So when you pick up a new bolt gun and you look at its stats, I don't think that it telling you that your accuracy is increased by 5% is really going to tell you very much. It's all about how the gun feels. And when you're playing with it, does this gun feel good to me? Does it feel better when I use this, lance-type weapon that shoots a beam of energy across the battlefield? Or does it feel better when I use this heavy bolter that spews out rounds at, 200 per minute? So maybe it really is about, getting back into the feeling of the game rather than deriving your information from numbers, deriving it from the feel.
You can also add a lot of mystery into a game if you start working on, like we were talking about before, the AI, so that it's unpredictable, so that it's how do I say it, situational, so that you can kind of look at something and realize that based on what it is and where it is and how it's acting, how you might be able to defeat it. And then you combine stuff like that in with procedural content so that things are constantly changing all around the player all the time, and that way there isn't a wiki you can go look up on stuff. All you can do when you look on a wiki in a game like that is to basically find tactics that might work but are not a certainty. You're not going to be able to fulfill a quest in the exact same steps all the time. The more variability that you can put into a game like that, the more sense of personal exploration and overcoming obstacles each player can have, and in our opinion, you get something really cool.
Yeah, so I think like learning stats or learning systems, it's all about mastery, right? It's feeling like you're getting better and better at the game, you're understanding it. Just by playing the game, you inherently have improved. It's not just, getting a better piece of equipment or something. So for example, in our game, in Trove, what we've done is we've got different biomes, different adventure points you can go to basically. There's different secrets you can learn. So you can learn, for a very simple example, that the ice ore comes from ice biomes, the fire ore comes from fire biomes. Certain dungeons have secret rooms and things like that. They're procedurally generated, so they might show up in different places. But you can learn about those things. And sure, it's something you might be able to look up online or watch someone else play, but it's really something that as you're playing through the game, you'll just pick up naturally and learn and master. And that's a lot more interesting to us than just trying to suss out how some numbers work, how your character simply mechanically works. It's something about the game world that you can master and learn.
So yeah, I mean, providing dynamic experiences, generated experiences, unique experiences is kind of one way to get around, this is where I go and look at this wiki, this is what I need to do. But there are still some people out there who do like the number crunching, who do like the min-max gear. So it really comes down to what the theme of your game is. I mean, if you're looking more towards, like I said, with the first-person shooter style games, it's going to be a little bit different versus someone who's doing more of a kind of a stat-oriented or a gear-oriented game. So it really depends kind of what the genre of the game is going to be as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to challenge the premise of your question.
Burn.
I don't necessarily think that we want to put the mystery back into MMOs. There are a lot of people who derive a lot of satisfaction out of figuring out all the stuff that goes on in MMO, both on the map and in the math. I think what you may be saying is, how is it okay so that if I don't go to the wiki and look stuff up, I don't play at a disadvantage to the guy who does? Like, you personally want to recapture the experience of exploration and discovery, but it bothers you to know that other people are skipping that part, or that if you don't do the research they do, they'll have some material advantage over you in the game. And I think that gets right back to the heart of this idea that the players have to generate the content. If the players are creating the content, if you don't know what that opponent is kitted out with, what armor they're wearing and what weapons they have and what tactics they're going to employ, you're in the dark as much as the next guy who fights them. But I don't believe it's actually possible to go back to the days when there can be a map with a mystery on it. I mean, you can have a completely randomly generated map and then it's always going to be a mystery, right? But if that map is persistent and the next guy can play the same map, it's not opaque. It will be transparent. It'll be put on a wiki somewhere. You may be seeking a value proposition which we can't deliver in the current level of technology. But I don't necessarily think that from our standpoint as developers, there's a lot we can really do to address the problem that other people are going to do a lot of research about our game.
A highly tuned rating counter is a very wonderful thing. But as the AI in these games is starting to emerge, it's going to be more fun to have some sort of encounter that can learn and fight against you as the time goes by. How can you reach a median between a finely tuned scripted encounter that will still be challenging and exciting 3 months after you beat it versus an encounter that's constantly learning that may be dull and not have the same type of polish that a scripted encounter would have?
That's a good question. And we'll go back the other way, Ryan.
Okay, so like raids in traditional theme park games are puzzles, not games. And the objective is to solve the puzzle. And puzzles are a great form of entertainment, so I'm not using that in any way to be disparaging. And some of those puzzles are ridiculously complicated, and you have to engage in a lot of behavior asymmetrically to make it work. But at the end of the day, once you figure out the puzzle, it's solved and you're done, and then you just have to do it, right? So Pathfinder Online has no raids, and we have no scripted content, and there's no puzzles. All the content in the game is either pretty bog standard AI mobs that just stand and wait for you to come fight them and engage them and take their stuff, or other players, which is really the objective. And I don't have to script the other players, they're the most dangerous game. So when you confront the most powerful magic users and the most powerful fighters and the most powerful clerics, you're going to be confronting other players, and I have no idea what they're going to do to try and stop you.
I mean, yeah, I mean, beyond just, like as you said, it's once you kind of really unlock and master how that raid's going to work, the only real thing you can bring into it is more variety and a little bit of randomness into it, introducing new abilities, perhaps even the bosses will change in there. You could have kind of a puzzle set with how the dungeon is regenerated. There's a variety of different things there, but as you mentioned, I think we're kind of moving more towards having players kind of experience new content and new unique challenges to be able to really keep kind of that experience different. Otherwise, you're just going to be grinding and grinding and grinding through those raids each time.
Yeah, I think I'll mostly agree with those guys. So basically raids are puzzles, right? And it's not like, Deep Blue playing Kasparov or anything, right? Like, we can kill you if as developers, if we wanted to, right? It's not bragging either. It's just not fun. But there is, in PvP games, that evolution does exist. Like that gameplay, it's usually called the metagame, where players evolve tactics against each other. You play against those tactics. If you can get ahead of the metagame, if you can figure out what is going to beat what people are doing right now, you can win. And that gameplay is really, really fun. Designing that with AI would actually be very, very complex. We could probably do it, actually. But the efficiency isn't necessarily there. We can design really, really good puzzle encounters that are very interesting to play, and then we can design really good systems where you can put a lot of players in there together, let them evolve a metagame and play against each other and have that experience.
Sure, I'll agree that players are the best raids, but as far as raids go, to answer your specific question, how do you basically not make garbage ones? You have to put a lot of work and effort into them. They're usually extremely expensive propositions. You put way more effort into a raid than players spend time in it. They tear through it really quickly and then they move on. So you're constantly trying to move ahead and make a better raid all the time. Now, of course, on EverQuest and EverQuest 2, we've had many, many years of experience making raids. This time around, what we're doing is we're trying to investigate what is fun about a raid, pull it apart, find a different way of putting that experience together that is rechewable but is dynamic in nature, so that basically every time you're fighting different situations, you're overcoming different kinds of puzzles, if you will, different kinds of clues and everything like that to give you hints on what you want to do. And I understand what you're saying about the finely tuned, very scripted kind of raid thing, but in general, that's only super fun for the people that are the speed burner gamers that basically go in there first and try to overcome it or dominate it so that nobody else can overcome the raid, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's got to be a different kind of game if it's going to satisfy what you're talking about.
So, speaking about the expense of creating this carefully scripted content, I can tell you personally, 6 months of 50-hour work weeks is what it took to make a single dungeon in Eternal Crusade. That was me writing those encounters. And we went that exact way of creating these incredibly scripted encounters that people really had to learn. They were puzzles. They were not just puzzles for player behavior, they were puzzles for your build. And that was really exciting and really interesting to us, and we're going the completely opposite direction with Eternal Crusade. For that exact reason. One of the big reasons we decided to make Eternal Crusade is because we had gotten tired of creating that very incredibly scripted content. So, that similar experience for us is all about multiplayer. It's all about being online. And I really enjoy playing with, for example, my dad. And when I'm playing Diablo 3 with my dad and we're in, fighting the Skeleton King, the Skeleton King makes a big swing, teleports over next to my dad, drops half of his health bar, and we're playing on hardcore. Oh my God. And that's a scripted encounter, right? That absolutely is scripted. But being there and playing with my dad makes it a different experience. How many of you have played Left 4 Dead 2? Absolutely. Now, maybe you fought the tank a million times. Maybe you fought a smoker a million times. But it's always different. It's always a surprise because it forces multiplayer. It forces interaction. And that's what we really want to get at with those encounters. They'll be very lightly scripted, but they'll require you to play together with other people, which is, I think, a really important thing for online games.
So from the WildStar perspective, again, I'll go back to skill. It's not just the usual these things are going to happen at this point in time. Just stand in these areas, you'll be good to go. A lot of it is, having a walkthrough is one thing, but if you're not good, you just can't get through it. So having skill be a part of it is something. Putting random events in there that are scripted is definitely something. And I know that sounds weird, random scripted, but if you have, for example, there's a raid encounter for us in our 40-person raid where there is elemental pairings. So you will get fire maybe 1 week, fire with water, and then next week it will be with something else. With ice, it will be something completely different. So that changes every single time, and week to week those things will change. And so that means that it's not going to be the same thing every single time that you go through, that it's not the same puzzle, it's not the same thing. It's skill based with that randomization to make it a little bit different, but then also have something where you have to have mastered the game completely to beat these things.
Thank you.
All right, next question. Actually, go ahead.
All right, so because I'm legitimately interested in the topic, what was the plan ZeniMax had with the Elder Scrolls Online?
For what?
How do you mean, man?
like what was their, what were they thinking, I guess, with having it, I don't know, because a lot of MMOs are stepping towards like microtransactions, like you buy the game and then the main source of income is microtransactions, and some obviously have purchasing still, purchasing like per month or whatever, which either way works, but why did they stick with a lot of the older, why did they step away from the Elder Scrolls series elements and step towards the MMORPG elements like grinding and stuff like that?
Well, I'm not sure if these guys can actually answer that because they're not on the Elder Scrolls team,
okay.
But we can take a part of your question, and what we'll do is talk about the free-to-play and subscription model and that age-old argument. How's that sound? Okay. Let's do that. Sorry, man.
I'm last. Who are you starting with? I'm last. Hey, everyone.
That's the luck of the draw, dude.
Guy.
I will be killed.
Yeah, it's fine. But I'm pretty used to having this conversation most of the time anyway. So we went with a subscription basically because we wanted to provide something that was completely worth your time and money. Ultimately, we have a ton of content. And basically, when you're playing through it, we don't have paywalls, we don't have things stopping you from playing through it. And on top of that, we also have our system with cred, meaning if you're super awesome, you can actually pay for your subscription with your in-game money. So if you're the hardest of the hardcore, you can play the game basically for free. So we wanted to have that blend, but also you notice we don't have any stores or in-game transactions that you have to buy anything for. It's all part of your subscription. So, you know, it's not to say that free-to-play doesn't work for anything, but, you know, when we started out with WildStar, we kind of knew, like, this is the model that we were going to go for, and that's how we designed the game. And when you design a game, you need to design it from what is fun, but you also need to design it from how are we going to charge people for it. And so I know some people in the room are like, I hate you, Frost, for what you just said, but that's how we feel on it.
They need to eat too, people.
Right? We need to eat, damn it.
I think that actually is a really interesting point. We need to eat. And it really does. And I'm both a fan of games and a developer of games. And as a fan of games, when I see a game and it comes out and I think the monetization practices are exploitative, I just shake my head. And I say, well, this isn't good, it's not worth it. Or, you know, if you purchase, I mean, how many of you have purchased a $60 game and you said, well, this was crap? Yes, absolutely.
If all of you don't raise your hands, there's something
Some
wrong.
people are just lazy. That's everyone.
I have perfect taste in games. That's never happened.
So, no matter what the monetization model is, you can have premium games that you purchase and then you never subscribe to. They can be crap. You can have premium games that you purchase and subscribe to. They can be, you know, maybe not what you were hoping for. Okay. You can have games that are free to play. Those can be not what you were hoping for. But on the other side of that coin, you can have all of those things work perfectly. I think I've read a lot of things that compare the monetization schemes going on in the industry right now, and I don't mean schemes like scheming. I mean, you know, monetization strategies. I've heard it compared a lot to theme parks. Now, how you have premium theme parks like Disney World where you pay once, you get in, and you can ride any ride. And it's fantastic, and it creates this really magical experience. Or you can have like the county fair where you pay on every ride, you pay 10 cents. And that's still really good, and it works really well for different people. So I think that they're completely valid. It's up to the developers to put forth a game that works, like you said, Stephen, for the monetization strategy you're using.
There are many ways to skin the cat. Free-to-play is not all the same thing. People call all free-to-play games free-to-play because it's easy to label them that way, but they're not the same. If you go and you have a Facebook experience, they're going to try to take all the money out of your pocket as fast as they can. And then you go to the other extreme and you go with an MMO that's free to play, and we're trying to keep you around for 20 years. So it's not like we're going to hold our hand out all the time. Things like that can be completely voluntary. You don't have to pay a single dime if you don't want to, if things are set up well. And so basically the idea of free to play versus subscription model and everything like that, it's different strokes for different folks, but my personal opinion as a gamer, I love free to play because I can go in and I can look at a game and decide whether or not it's quality and whether or not their monetization scheme is set up in a way that I think is palatable, and if so, I can stay. And that kind of freedom of choice is something that I think is really admirable. Plus, it puts all of the burden of quality on the developer's shoulders, because if it's no good, you don't stay, and then we don't make a dime. So it's risky from our point of view, but if you're very, very confident about your quality and the ideas behind your game, it can be extremely lucrative because more people come and check out the game.
Yeah, so disclosure, Trove will be free to play. And to me, it's value, right? As long as you're getting value for your money, you're getting something you want for the money you're putting in, really both of them can work. For us, we saw free to play as a way to basically add more value. You can play with your friends no matter what. You can get them into the game, they can play with you. For online games, that is crazy good. Like, they don't have to buy a box, they don't have to pay a subscription, they can just jump on and play. You can send them a link, they can download the client, they can get in there. And I think it's really hard to say no to that.
Okay, I guess let's just be honest. A lot of companies, they put in a large advertising budget and then they can go and sell a subscription in a box model to basically try to recoup that as quickly as possible. Then a lot of them will dump about 9, 12 months later into a free-to-play model. So we're seeing more and more of that as kind of the starting point, then kind of going into the free-to-play model. Just to be transparent again, free-to-play model here as well. We're a small indie company. Most of you probably, a deal of you probably have no idea who or what the Repopulation is. The big thing for us is being able to get the product out there to as many players as possible. And traditionally, a lot of small independent games, especially in the MMO world, have not had a really good track record with subscriptions, just because no one's really willing to give it a try if they've never heard of it. So it works really well for us to try to really get the door open and get players in, allow them to really kind of try and play the game. We also look at the kind of the players who really don't spend any money. Those are also content players. They provide content to other players who are spending the money. So it might be a friend, it might be someone that's in their family who is playing the game as well. So it allows us to really build a larger community as kind of a point of that by having more players in the game.
What is the Repopulation?
What is the Repopulation? Basically, we're a sandbox MMORPG. Kind of in a quick nutshell, people have really kind of compared us to like the spiritual successor of Star Wars Galaxies. No skills, no levels, no levels, no classes. Pretty much allows players to customize their character however they want. We have in-game housing, allow players to build and kind of run their own nations. So we really focus on allowing the players to really create and build the content in the game instead of focusing more so on the scripted content in the game.
Yeah, that looks great.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, so I could probably do an hour on this topic.
And he's done thousands of words on our site as well.
I'll really try not to do an hour on this topic. Let me make a couple of observations. Actually, let me address your actual question about Elder Scrolls Online. So Skyrim sold 20 million copies, and they probably made about Bethesda probably made about $40 a copy. That game made $800 million. They will never make $800 million on Elder Scrolls Online. If that game runs for 100 years, they won't make $800 million in that game. You know, I think that game was funded at a time when there was a lot of investment money that was interested in pursuing the MMO space because they looked at what Blizzard was doing. And there's a very classic thing where you say, all I have to do is get 10% of that market and we're all going to be rich. You know, and then you know, 90 people try to get 10% of the market, and it doesn't work. So, you know, I think Elder Scrolls Online is going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a profitable game. I have no expectation it will ever recoup its design cost, but it'll probably operate on a go-forward positive cash flow basis. And it certainly won't make as much money as Skyrim 2 is going to make. So about 5 years ago, and I may be off on my timeline, Turbine made a really innovative decision with Dungeons & Dragons Online. They converted that game to a free-to-play model with a microtransaction store, but they kept the subscriptions. So you could choose to pay a subscription and have a flat monthly fee, or you could buy microtransaction currency and purchase things in the cash store. And with your subscription, you got a certain amount of microtransaction currency, and you got kind of a pre-packed batch of stuff that was equivalent to some of the things that you might buy in the store. And then they did the same thing with Lord of the Rings Online shortly thereafter. And it's my opinion that's probably the ultimate evolution of the business model in the West. How many people in the audience have a cell phone that they pay for on subscription? And how many of you have a cable TV subscription? Okay, so like subscriptions are not weird in the West. We're all familiar with them. They're not this bizarre thing that they are in the East. In the West, a lot of people buy stuff on subscription, and it's really not that big a deal. They don't mind the fact that they get repetitively billed. What microtransactions do for you, though, is they let you get some money from the people who can't or won't pay a subscription. So if the subscription is $15 a month and all I have is $5 a month, I can't give you any of my money if I have to give you at least $15. But if I've got a microtransaction model and I can give you the $5, you're going to get $5 more from me than you were going to get before. And if I happen to be a guy who can drop $1,000 on an awesome sword, I can give you $1,000, whereas before your upside from me was capped at 15 bucks. So microtransactions are great to get money from the long tail of people who don't necessarily want to pay the full price of the subscription, and they're great for the people who have a lot of disposable income and want to give you a lot more money than the subscription. And if you do a hybrid model like what Turbine did and what we're going to do with Pathfinder Online, you don't make people make a choice. You give them the option to decide if they are comfortable with the subscription or if they want to do microtransactions.
Excellent. Okay. Next question, please.
All right, so I'm going to ask a question and then kind of explain what I mean by it. So
this question is 5 parts.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. No,
you thought I was joking.
No,
you're killing me, Smalls.
No, my question is, when will you see MMOs become as immersive as single-player games? What I mean by that is, look at like Skyrim versus Elder Scrolls Online. You can have 100 mods on Skyrim and it's like the most immersive experience you can get in gaming. But then you look at like an MMO version of it and you can't compare it. And you could picture yourself in like the BioShock universe, for example, like in BioShock Infinite, like if you were like a shopkeeper or something, like that could be an actual person being a shopkeeper. And I don't know, like, I feel like a lot of MMOs that are coming out nowadays, they don't give as an immersive experience, like, I'm in this world, like, compared to a single-player game. Like, if I'm in a Grand Theft Auto universe, I'm like...
It's the other people, man. It's the other people.
You think so?
I'm part of it, but I'll let Ryan start, actually.
Yeah. So I worked at CCP for about 3 years. And CCP, they make EVE Online. They like to think about making MMOs that are more meaningful than real life. And I've adopted that motto at Goblinworks. That's what we're going to attempt to do, is make an MMO that's more meaningful than real life. And the first time that you hear that, you might kind of be taken a little bit aback and say, wow, that's a little weird. Like, what about your family and your faith and your community, right? But if you think about it, a lot of people in the world have a job that they could care less about. Their job is a vehicle for them to get some spare cash so they can go do the thing they really love. They work in a cube farm all day so they can go kayak on the weekend. Or they may be in a situation where they're going to school and the thing they're pursuing as a degree is just an economic thing. They want to get a job in a field. They don't really have a passion for that thing. But in the online worlds, you could be the captain of a fleet of starships, or you could be a heroic adventurer, or you could be a mob boss, right? You can really live these fantasies that are very difficult for us to imagine living in real life. And so they can become more meaningful than the things people are actually doing. You know, I think at the heart of your question is this issue about being the one, the chosen one. When I'm in Skyrim, like I'm the one, right? I got picked, and I have the blood of the dragons in me, and I'm going to assassinate the emperor. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. The whole story revolves around me, and so you know that's pretty darn immersive. Obviously you can't have that in an MMO. The story has to revolve around everybody. But I think that what we see over time is that, especially in sandbox MMOs, the feeling that you really care about what it is that you're doing in those games becomes so incredibly immersive that it really does, in my opinion, it really transcends single-player games. I actually have a hard time playing single-player games these days because I miss that experience that I get when I play a really well-constructed sandbox MMO.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, what you're seeing is you got some game developers and designers are trying to deliver the single-player experience in an MMO, which I think is the entirely wrong direction to go towards. A single-player experience typically will be consumed and it's finished. An MMO is we're talking about there, but you have to, especially for a subscription model, any kind of model really, you want to keep bringing people in, new content, whatever it might be. But the community really is the core aspect of what you see in an MMO. The single-player game, it's you. Maybe there's a multiplayer element, whatever that might be. But the single-player element is just you in the game. You spend your 50, 100 hours, whatever it might be. If you're doing modding, it might be able to expand it a little bit more. But you're really focusing on the single-player element of that game. I think with an MMO, I think probably there's been some surveys done, some people have kind of figured out, well, they want single player experience, so they start giving people single player experience. And I think that's kind of going in the wrong direction. You want to really have the community aspect of the game kind of built in into the top of it. You want players to be able to interact with each other. You basically want them to almost be interdependent on each other, and that's really a core focus of MMO that I think is starting to come back again as well.
Yeah, I think you have to get rid of jumping. As soon as you have jumping,
That's what I was.
no. Bunny hopping all over the place. It just happens. But no, and really, immersion is an interesting beast, right? Like, I've never been more immersed in a game as when I was a guild leader, you know, playing World of Warcraft hardcore, like, you know, our competition with other guilds, you know, pushing each other, make each other better, you know, people having their own things going on in real life, getting to know people. That was incredibly immersive for me, and I actually don't get that from other games. That's why I'm so into MMOs. But yeah, just get rid of jumping.
Really good single-player games get you involved with the emotion of the game, and you become immersed because you start to care about what's going on in the world and what you're doing. Lots of single-player games are guess what the designer was thinking when he put this together. MMOs are designed to be different, especially the new breed of sandbox MMOs, where basically everything is changing all the time, and the players are creating or causing a lot of the content to change constantly all around you. Because it's dynamically changing and because you have to react to what's going on in the world, you're going to be organizing groups of players to do things on or you're basically going to be ad hocing it. You're going to be trying to figure out what's going on, and like for instance, well, you know, okay, I'll talk about my game. So when you push a band of orcs around and then they start attacking a nearby village instead of where they were, well, you feel good for pushing them out of the area they were, but you feel really bad because now they're killing all the citizens of this little village. So all those kinds of things can start to make you feel really emotional about what's going on. So the more the more it changes. I'll take the Elmer Fudd road out. The more that it changes, the more that you can start to feel like you're making an impact on the world, which creates emotional connection, which brings back some of that feeling you're getting from single-player games.
That is an unfair question, and I am offended.
The end.
Oh yeah.
The end. No more jumping.
Single-player games spend their entire budget trying to immerse you. Their entire budget is driven to getting you to feel like you don't realize you're in a game. I haven't actually, this is a really great question. It's making me think about things in a very different way. I actually think that immersion in a game arises from the flow state that the developers are always trying to drive you into, where you are first challenged to the edge of your ability, and then they back off and they say, oh, now you get to relax. And I think a game like Skyrim gets that really great because they put you in this flow state where you have these random encounters, or you come out of that cave where you were just fighting your way through this cave and you're a brand new player, you have no idea what you're doing, you step out, and then it's the lull in that flow state. And what they do during that lull is they give you this amazing vista. And that's the kind of thing that single-player games with their incredibly carefully scripted experience can do that MMORPGs have a really hard time doing. But where I think that we have the edge is exactly in immersing yourself in a community, immersing yourself in the interactions that you have with other players. For example, in EVE Online, you're immersed in a game that is more important than real life, or it feels more compelling than real life. And I think that that's really the angle that MMORPGs have to tackle in order to be able to compete, because we can't spend our entire budget crafting that sort of thing.
So I'll give you kind of a single player answer to what you had kind of brought up. Grand Theft Auto 4, I remember playing single player. I don't really have any like fond memories of the single player. Like I don't remember a lot of things that happened in that game, but I do.
You didn't like being a Serbian war criminal?
I mean, it was like, I get you guns. You want guns? We go find it. It's fine. Yeah, like
You should be quiet now before we do things to you, eh?
with them buddies, we have good time. All right.
You know, like I was like, cool. So I don't recall much from the single player. Their multiplayer, however, the cops and robbers stuff, is awesome. And I have very fond memories because we were robbers and we got away, and the cops who were other players like totally derped and missed us, right? And we get to the helicopter and everybody's jumping in except for one guy. He's like, guys, I can't get in. I'm like, get in, buddy. And he's like, I can't do it. And the cops are coming over. I'm like, later, bro. We took off. He's like, no. And it was like that scene from Platoon, you know, like it's just like just lit up. Hysterical, right? Like I remember that, and I have friends that I'm like, dude, you remember when we got in the helicopter? He's like, yeah, and that guy was on the ground like a putz. You know, it was great. That's the difference, I think, between, you know, I mean, BioShock was cool, kind of, but I mean, really, the point of them trying to be movies is exactly right. You know, I think that what MMOs provide is that experience of other players coming in and doing something like you're about to die and somebody just like leaps in with a sword attack and like decimates the dude that was about to kill you. You're like, thank you, friend. And then the guy's like, and then takes off. That's awesome, right? I'm single player-ing it, right? But there's another person in the world that kind of came in and helped out. So I mean, that's kind of the perspective I would look at, that we definitely have the edge over, you know, single player games.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have time for probably like 2 more quick questions, guys.
Actually, I was going to say, do you want to just bullet point one and try to get everybody in? And everybody can just take
like speed round?
Yeah.
Speed round.
All right, let's do it.
These guys have been standing the whole time. We got to take care
Let's do it, speed round.
All right. So we've been talking about theme park versus sandbox games.
Oh, great.
On one side we have Mr. Frost, who's hardcore theme park with WildStar, and Mr. Dancey, who's hardcore with the sandbox. And I was interested on your perspectives of where you think that those markets will be over the next several years with your games, and what you think that those markets could learn from one another.
Oh man, these are bullet point answers?
Yeah. And in the next
See what I
hour,
mean?
yeah.
2 more. 2 more is all we got.
Okay, we got like 5 minutes too. Okay, really quick. I think that I was talking about this in another panel earlier, I think that there's going to be a lot of mutt genres that are going to kind of come out, where you'll see kind of a mix of all those things. I don't want to get into it because I want to let other people answer stuff. Go.
They will blend.
UGC is going to take care of a lot of that as people like develop their own ideas.
All right.
They're already blending. Dark Souls is an MMO.
Good point.
I think people have interested in both type of games, so you're going to still see both type of games being developed as well.
WildStar is the last AAA theme park MMO that will ever be made.
We're still AAA though, so I'll take that.
All right, thanks. Next question, real quick. Go, go, go.
I wanted to ask about toxicity. Gee, I hope that's a word. In like
it's a good album by System of a Down, actually.
All right. There's like this big stigma in MMOs that there's like a percentage of people who play MMOs are really like hateful, angry people, and then another percentage really like helpful, like nice people. And I've seen a lot of MMOs. I've seen a lot of companies rather, like Riot and Blizzard with League and World of Warcraft, doing a lot.
How do you deal with it, kind of?
Yeah, doing a lot to try to like babysit. Is it really the developer's job, or do you think this is something that should be shown more in the community to sort themselves out on its own?
Awesome. Cool. Go ahead, Ryan. Bullet points.
I think there's no magic bullet answer. The only approach that works is to have a layered approach to the problem with lots of different solutions to the challenge.
You know, you can always have a PvP open game where you can just shoot the guy in the face and take care of the problem.
Yeah, as much as you can do to let your community self-sort into groups, it solves a lot of that. And most of the games that have most problems force you to play with other people.
Reputation and personal responsibility is the answer. The more that you're actually answerable for your actions, the easier it is to avoid the trollishness.
I'm blanking. It is the developer's responsibility. I do think it is, because toxicity in online communities drives people away. And we don't want that. We want as many people playing our games as possible, especially in the case of sandbox games where players are content. And that's going to be true for Eternal Crusade. Each player that gets driven away is one less player for you to shoot. That sucks. One of the ways we're trying to solve that is those self-selecting communities. We have a large group that's 100 people. We have a small group that's 10 people. So when you are tired of interacting with a large group, you can go back to your small group.
So you should also, as a designer, kind of reward things that are done well, you know? So like we reward grouping in WildStar with a type of currency that will allow you to get certain things, for example. Also, if you create communities within your games, like MMOs have, I think that certain people will kind of gravitate towards other things and kind of work in the communities that work well for them.
Cool, let's keep going. Another one.
In-game economies rise and fall like natural economies, but how will you deal with the problem of professional gold farming and or people paying like real-life money for items in a non-microtransaction game?
Go.
No, go ahead, Guy. No, that's fine.
Go.
All right. So, really quick, we have Cred, which is a very similar thing that will hopefully weed out some of the bot stuff where, players are spending their own money on, in-game time and people can put it blah, blah, blah. You've heard that stuff before. So, that, and we also have economy teams that solely study the economy of that stuff and try to work that out from that perspective.
In-game economies are a very challenging topic, and I think that what WildStar is doing with Cred and what Eve does with Flex, exactly. I think those are really interesting solutions to that. I think you're going to see a lot more ways for developers to bring those kinds of external payments into the game. One of the most recent high-profile failures of that was Diablo 3. But I don't think that the idea was wrong. I think that the implementation was wrong. So I think we'll start seeing more experimentation along those lines.
Gold farmers only sell a few products, and they're looking for a very, very efficient business. So if you can complicate their life to the point where they don't want to do it or it's not efficient for their business, they will go find another home. It's not that difficult. You just need to embrace what they're trying to do and make sure that there's a legal, easy way to do it inside your game.
Yeah, it's basically the same. For the bad things, make sure it's easier to do it in someone else's game. And for the good ones, provide those services yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have problems with it, especially if it's, if the economy is there and they can do it for cheap and they keep, keep going through there and trying to, to keep selling the gold. So you're always have some bit of issue unless you start really getting into the business yourself.
I have nothing meaningful to add.
Thank you. All right, last one, guys. I'm sorry. That's all we got.
All right. I feel that the identity of classes is being lost. I mean, when I used to play in a group, I would be the cleric, and I wanted to be the healer, and I wanted to be the healer. And now every class can heal. You click a button, switch your talent spec. Oh, the tank's the healer now. And I feel that that's a very bad thing because I don't feel like I'm contributing anything to the group. Do you feel the same way?
Yes.
Yes, Josh.
So yeah, I think we look at providing roles, allowing players to kind of have multiple roles in the game. So that doesn't also necessarily, define you as this certain role. You can switch the roles, but I mean, you'd still get into the issue where you still be able to switch out to a role that can heal. But it also gives you a lot more versatility in what you're doing, so you can play different roles in the game.
Yeah, in Trove, you can switch your class frequently, but you have to do it at town. And each class has a well-defined role. We think that's important just to you. Being aspirational in a game is why you're there. And that's something we think is important. So yes.
Yeah, you basically want to become good at something, but having the flexibility to find what you like instead of being locked into something right at the beginning of a game is a good idea. So having to be being able to go through the game and collect a bunch of different options, but then kind of specialize in on the things that you love as a gamer is a really great way to do it, especially if you then allow them to become better at it the more they focus on it.
I wrote it down this time. I think yours was the only question so far that the audience clapped for.
Yeah.
Your personal identity in a game is one of the most powerful things that the developers can help you build. And I think that the answer to your question is you have to let players try different things, and that's why games have moved into this status of being able to switch around anytime. But you have to make being really good at that thing take skill and time so that your core identity feels yours.
So with WildStar, you can actually switch those things. So if everybody wants to boo me, I'm cool with that. Okay, cool. So you can actually have a tank or DPS role or whatever, but we have the limited action set, which kind of makes you pick whatever you're good with. And the whole goal with that was that we don't have like the super optimal, but at the same time you find what works well for your skill and your ability to kind of do stuff. And if you want to talk further about this, you can totally stop by the booth. We'll talk about it more.
Thank you, guys. That's it. Thanks for coming. Hey, these guys. On your way out, there are beta keys for WildStar. There are beta keys for the Landmark. Just grab them. Make sure you get them. If we run out, blame SOE and Carbine.
I have some folks too.